Therapist. I got it right. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm honored, very grateful to be here among very talented colleagues from Estonia. I'm very grateful to Andras, to my dear colleague Larissa Yogi from University of Tallinn. I'm also very grateful for my interpreter, but I will thank her separately in the end. I'm very much impressed of what you do here for two reasons. One is because it differs so much from what we do down there in Greece, but also because you have managed to create a pattern of developing, I wouldn't say shaping, I don't like the verb shape, shape relates more to the body, of developing identity for adult educators. So in this respect, what I'm going to present today is based both in my experience, not as an academic necessarily, but also as an adult educator. Yes, I am a professor of adult and continuing education in my own country, in the Aristotelese University of Thessaloniki, but essentially I'm an educator. I'm a teacher. I teach adults. Okay. Now, I'm going to focus on 5 different issues today. The first is the issue of professionalization of adult educators in Europe. What does it mean to be a professional adult educator in Europe today? What is the current debate? This is the second issue. The third is how we can reframe this debate. I say reframe simply because the current debate is policy-led, meaning that it's regulated by certain policies. I will also suggest some issues, some recommendations that can be easily taken into account both by policymakers but also by adult educators in practice. And in the end, I will also focus on the situation in my own country, which, as I have already said, is different from the situation in this country. So what do we mean when we say professionalization of adult educators in Europe? Essentially, we need to understand the term professionalization as such. Okay? So across Europe, the articulation of the field differs considerably, so we cannot find one meaning of what constitutes adult educators as professionals. Okay? This means that adult educators have a different status, occupational status in Greece, different status in Estonia, different in Germany, different in the United Kingdom. The spectrum as well of adult education staff, because we essentially focus on adult educators, but in the adult education field, we're essentially called to relate to tasks that don't always come hand in hand with teaching, for example. So the spectrum of adult education staff is extremely broad, both in terms of provision, but also in terms of employment conditions. Employment conditions are completely different, for example, in this country. In Greece, I will explain later, Italy, okay, the Netherlands, Sweden, etc. And of course, the third issue in this debate is the intense discussion and perhaps the persistence on the competencies and skills needed by adult educators. Okay? Something that essentially I will argue against later on. I think it is important, but I don't think it's so important as to regulate all policies based on that pattern. So, what we essentially need to understand professionalization in the adult education sector, especially for adult educators, is a common framework. Okay? I have participated in various European projects that focused exactly on this, creating a common framework for identifying various sets of competencies that adult educators need in order to operate in the adult education field. However, I think that developing our professional identities, shaping them even, based on a common framework is not enough. Okay? A common framework right this moment is available. There is a study that was commissioned by the European Commission, DG EAC. The study is there since 2008. However, it does not seem to affect things that much. Why? I will explain immediately. Okay? What I want to stress is that before we go to a common framework, we first need to understand what it means to be, but also to become a professional adult educator. Being a professional adult educator is not a process that happens at once. It develops through the years, through the experience, through, if you like, the constant relation to the profession and its challenges. Okay? On the one hand, yes, it does entail mastery of certain skills and competencies, undoubtedly. But on the other hand, we need to understand that it is a social process by which any occupation transforms itself into a profession. So, having this thing in mind, we can argue that adult educators in various parts of Europe may not hold that skill or competence that comes with the social process. They might hold only skills and competencies, basically psychopedagogical. Does this make them professionals? No, we need both. Both psychopedagogical competencies and skills, but also deep involvement in the social process. Now, what's happening, however, at policy level is a different issue. I'm saying this because the European policy framework so far, they do suggest, they do propose for innovative pedagogy in adult education. They do address a shift on an emphasis in knowledge acquisition and new roles for learning, for adult educators, especially learning facilitators. This entails multicultural competencies, ready and motivated to face new challenges or promote democratic values. However, what happens in practice in various parts of Europe is totally different. Why? Because there are different priorities in society, in the economy, or even the adult education market. Very recently, for example, Greece was deeply affected by the refugees' mobility, especially from Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq. This also affects society. This affects the economy. Therefore, it does affect our roles as adult educators. Okay? But how much of that is entailed in the existing policies? Okay? This is a big question. So the current debates on professionalization of adult educators, I think, is not enough to address the challenges and the issues we're facing today in Europe. If professionalism in adult education is discussed at all, then, as I say, the debate usually refers to one particular sector within adult education. Adult education is big, very broad, has a very broad spectrum, okay? But the policies essentially address skills and competencies that relate more to those adult educators who work in the VET sector, vocational education and training. Why? It's more lucrative, so to speak. People who participate in VET programs, they pay sometimes their own money or their companies pay money. So this means essentially that adult educators that work in that sector, they must have high skills and competencies. But adult education is not just that. Okay? There is a large, even broader perhaps, a realm of adult education that covers second chance education, okay, that covers adult education um, so to speak, for programs for free time, okay? Or even adult education that relates more to social inclusion or social rehabilitation. So this means that we need to consider different areas in adult education and essentially focus on the needs of adult education, of adult educators in these different areas. However, policymakers seem to focus more on professional skills and abilities. Okay? In this triangle of professional action, what happens at policy level is that there is more emphasis, more focus on professional skills and abilities. That's on the right corner as we look at the triangle, whereas professional knowledge and understanding is missing. Even more so, professional values and personal commitment is not there. So the current debate seems to emphasize more one of the aspects that we need to become professionals. Although this debate has been erratic over the European nations, because there are different priorities in different member states, this means that adult educators serve for different needs for different groups of adults. So the debate has been erratic over the European nations and perhaps more intense in some areas. It has a notable contradiction. Adult educators in Europe are labeled as professionals, but adult educators in VET essentially have this label. What happens with the rest of them? Okay? If you ask somebody who works in vocational education and training in Greece, for example, they consider themselves as professionals. But if you ask somebody who works in second chance education or in a prison facility, they don't consider themselves as professionals. I will explain why later. Another aspect that is not that much in the debate is the employment conditions of adult education staff in general, which is more or less insecure everywhere in Europe. I understand that this is because we do not operate collectively, meaning that we don't present in a collective manner our needs, okay, within the work environment, within the employment. We don't address the challenges we face collectively in Europe. Many adult education staff members do not even consider themselves as adult educators, but rather as belonging to a certain social or business context sometimes. Okay? This means that they have not developed a certain identity as adult educators. They might do it because they have free time or because of the money sometimes. So, this is because there is an intense debate on the competencies and skills needed by people working in certain jobs in the field of adult education. And when I say competencies and skills, I again refer to teaching skills, essentially, and some psychopedagogical skills. So there is a deep contradiction in the professional agenda. On the one hand, there is a descriptive and analytical account of the field in which people earn their living as adult educators, and on the other, there is an ongoing process of professional validation and quality assurance. Okay? So this contradiction means that more and more people who work in the field of adult education as adult educators, they cannot see themselves as professionals. Okay? This happens a lot in many parts of Europe because they do not understand the field or they do not understand the workplace in which they provide their service. On the other hand, they occasionally do not understand what kind of skills they need to possess or essentially how to qualify themselves in these skills. So how can we reframe this debate, or if you like, how can we make this debate more realistic? Okay? Because we're talking about policies that have a top-down approach, whereas what we need right now in Europe, we need a bottom-up approach. So conceptualizing adult education as a distinct professional field is of little use when we discuss professionalism, as there are several occupations that exist in the field. Okay? I don't know if this is the case in Estonia, but I know that it happens, for example, in the United Kingdom. It happens in Greece as well. Adult educators, or people who are qualified as adult educators, they do not essentially operate as such. They might be allocated an administrative role or a manager role, okay, but not an adult educator role. This is a bit confusing, isn't it? So we need to be very specific of what we ask from adult educators, both in terms of skills and competencies, but also the tasks and roles to which we allocate them. So it may be fruitful, therefore, to focus on the needs of adult educators performing specific roles. Let's start from there. I find it extremely important to conduct research all around Europe that focuses on the needs of adult educators themselves, especially people who identify themselves as adult educators, because this will justify to a very large extent the necessity to examine new ways on how to identify and frame required skills and competencies for them. What we also need is to understand that these skills and competencies might as well be comparable. Okay? We can find different cases in different European nations, in different settings within a nation, different settings of adult education, I mean, but also see how diversity develops. So in order to address the issues discussed in the current debate, basically, as I said, which is policy-led on professionalization of adult educators, we need to reframe its major conditions that essentially prioritize the comparability of competencies among adult educators. So instead of finding simply what's similar, we also need to stress what's different. So, in order to create a model that embraces both comparable but also diverse competencies, we need to examine, do research that relates to the employment conditions for adult educators, the sectoral diversity in the field of adult education, and essentially the immediate needs of the adult educator. Now, if we go back to our initial question, what shapes our identities? I know that Larissa and Katrin have already suggested that is it us, is it others, who regulates the profession in the end? So far, all around Europe, perhaps with some minor exceptions, it seems that the profession is not self-regulated. Okay? It might be regulated by the state, essentially, most of the times, or it might be regulated by certain organizations that are affiliated to the formal state. So what shapes our identities? Is it knowledge? Is it skills and competencies? Is it the workplace, the environment in which we work? Is it the social demands? Is it certain values that we hold as individuals? Is it others? So I would suggest it's all that. But we need to prioritize some of those. We need to create a realistic framework and see which one fits for every case, okay? Not one framework fits all. So, this framework essentially, or this approach if you like, needs to go beyond the policy rhetoric. It seems nowadays that the whole field of adult education is dominated by what policymakers suggest in the European Commission or perhaps at the national level, which is also affected by the European Commission suggestions. However, we need to understand that policymakers do not have in mind the needs of the adult educator when they develop their policies. Okay? They might have in mind a very generic aspect of the field of adult education, but it's not very clear for them of how the adult education field develops in different countries. Okay? And I think this is justified by the quite recent development that adult education has moved from a Directorate General for Education and Culture in the European Commission to Directorate General for Employment, which basically creates a totally different dynamic in the field in terms of decision making. So policy rhetoric does not pursue the professionalization aspects of adult educators in a realistic manner. Okay? Perhaps they see things from a distance, from the clouds, if you like, but they don't see what's really happening. It discusses the label, but it does not orientate towards the processes, and this is very important, and I think the one lesson I've learned today is that we need to focus on the process of developing our identities. It does not orientate towards the processes that can create the conditions for adult educators to become professionals. This is something that we know, we hold as knowledge, and therefore we need, if you like, to make it more visible. So what we essentially need to focus on is some common characteristics of professionalism, okay, on which we can agree upon. Knowledge, for example, quality, it has been mentioned many times, ethics, it's also very important. Accountability, social responsibility, if you like, experience, and of course, earnest living. In terms of, if it's a profession, it must be paid, we must be paid for that. So, basically what shapes our professional, if you like, identities is also making our practice visible, I suggest. This takes us to what you discuss. It's something that has never been discussed in my own country at this level. Developing communities of practice, networking, okay? Do we have such examples? Yes, I think Andras and what you do is an excellent example that can also affect policy making at this level. Community relationships. I think all the educators that have talked before me basically expressed exactly that. Besides their talent, besides their efforts, they seem to have a very close relationship to the community to which they provide. Therefore, campaigning educational programs is very important. Shared professional development, it's also very important. Sharing experience, okay? Not simply exchanging experience, but sharing in terms of action research. This essentially means that we can help other colleagues that operate in the field to elaborate on their practice and make it better. And of course, core values that goes beyond the ordinary skills that someone would expect policymakers essentially, that adult educators need to have. Going beyond skills, attitudes, and essentially ethics. So the core values of professionalism include honesty and integrity. These are things that you will never see in a policy paper, for example. Okay? But these are things that we can very closely relate to. Honesty, integrity. Okay? All the examples from the experience of the adult educators that have talked so far show exactly this. These are honest people with integrity, commitment, okay? Altruism, okay? Helping each other, respect for the learners, respect for the workplace, respect for the colleagues, responsibility and accountability. We don't do something in random in adult education. We are accountable for what we do, okay? And of course, this essentially affects our performance and the quality of our work. Compassion and empathy. I really like the World Cafe exercise previously because it showed that most people who participated seem to prioritize these values. And of course, dedication and self-improvement. Okay? So these are core values in the profession of adult education that, if you like, is a shared token among adult educators all around Europe. However, when it comes down to putting them in the debate for becoming professionals, they somehow disappear. Why? Because it's the policies that seem to take lead on that. So, having said that, the situation in Greece is comparably different to what's happening here, at least at the level of discussing issues like the ones we're discussing today, shaping our identities. Now, what's really strange in Greece is that although we're a small country, okay, a bit less than, yes, small, it is a small country, okay, it's small and dispersed, okay, with many islands, someone would expect things to be quite decentralized, okay, they're not, okay. This means that the needs of an adult learner in a far remote island in the Aegean, or the other side, in the Ionian Sea, for the state, are the same as the adult learner who lives in a very urbanized area in Athens or Thessaloniki, where I come from. But are they? Okay? I say this because everything is so centralized and so state-regulated, with laws, with registries, with procedures that don't leave much space for the adult education professionals to breathe and develop their identity. Adult education staff basically is seconded from primary and secondary education. Okay? Most people who work full-time in primary and secondary education, they're considered to have the psychopedagogical skills to teach adults. They don't. Okay? So the state, however, thinks that being a teacher in primary education, okay, or in secondary education, qualifies you to teach adults as well. Teaching staff with a degree, part-time, can also be an adult educator. So if you work part-time, but you have a degree, let's say in biology, okay, and you want to work in adult education, you can, without having any psychopedagogical qualification or skill as such. But I will come to this a bit later. Also, technical support staff can operate as an adult educator, or full or part-time. Managerial and administrative staff, occasionally again, they can be teachers who work in schools, but they can also be managers in an adult education structure. And of course, they can also work as counseling and guidance staff. So you see, there is a broad array of people who can work in adult education in Greece with different career paths, different points of departure, if you like, different skills, but they can all find a place in adult education in Greece. Why? Because this is the law, okay? So the standard qualification for those who wish to work in non-formal, non-vocational adult education is a degree in an area relevant to that they wish to work. So if I want to teach a language to an adult audience, let's say foreign language, French, for example, and I hold a degree in French literature, I can apply and be an adult educator. This is a different procedure, but I'm just saying this simply because I want to stress the irrelevance, if you like, of state policies to the needs of the learner. Working experience is not always necessary, but is desirable. Okay? This means that you don't have to, so to speak, previous experience working with adults. Okay? Adult education structure managers are normally people with or without teaching experience, but with a degree in a relevant area or a degree in management. Okay? Now, all these are requirements for those who wish to enter a registry. In Greece, we have a registry that is managed by these two organizations. Okay? The first is called EOPEP. It's a national organization for the certification and qualification and of qualifications and vocational guidance. But this organization, what it basically does is to create the professional profile for adult educators who work only in vocational education and training. However, the other organization, the Youth and Lifelong Learning Foundation, seems to take from the registry of EOPEP in non-vocational structures that provide adult education. Okay? This means that those who are registered for EOPEP as adult educators in VETs can also operate in any other adult education environment. Okay? This is wrong. This goes totally to the wrong direction. Okay? Holding a degree in education or a master's in a like area is considered an advantage. So we see more and more people in Greece asking for degrees or master's degrees, master's diplomas in adult education, not because they really want to start their careers as adult educators, but because they see it as an opportunity to enter the registry at EOPEP, okay? And perhaps later on find a starting job as adult educators in the structures that are coordinated by the Youth and Lifelong Learning Foundation. This is not healthy. Managers and teaching staff are always appointed by the Ministry of Education after going through a formal selection procedure by EOPEP or in EDIVIM, the Youth and Lifelong Learning Foundation is in EDIVIM. So what I'm saying here is that the profession is entirely regulated by these two state organizations. Okay? This does not leave much space for adult educators in Greece to create a community of practice. On the contrary, it promotes competition amongst them. I see this a lot, especially with students who want to acquire a master's degree in adult education, and the only reason they want to do that is because they want to enter that registry, for no other reason. So teaching staff is normally selected by a committee with representatives from the previous organizations. Adult educators' profession is not very attractive, but however, because of the economic crisis, more and more young people see this as an opening career opportunity. Okay? In my own opinion, it is not. Okay? Because it is very low paid, and of course, there are very few places. Perhaps 10 years ago, there were more programs. Now, there are very few adult education programs that operate around the country. I will explain later in which structures. Working conditions are generally good. However, there is an overstressing in competencies, and this is because that organization, EOPEP, has already created an occupational profile for adult educators. Can you imagine that? I mean, EOPEP has created professional profiles for over 200 professions in Greece. One of these professions is adult educator, okay? But of course, it has not created a professional profile for architects, doctors, nurses, okay? Or school teachers. But it has created a profile for adult educators, okay? Why? Because they want to regulate this profession. All staff goes through an induction period. This means that if you don't have the formal qualification, you have to go through an induction period. It's about 6 weeks. However, 75% of that induction period of that course is by distance. It's theoretical. 25% is vis-a-vis, face-to-face, but I have to say that there is no practice involved. It focuses on theory, it's theoretical based, it's content based, okay, not competence based. At the end, they go through an examination process, again with representatives from these two organizations. And if these representatives think that the person that they have in front of them qualifies for an adult educator, then they put their signature and they put them in the registry, and that's it. Okay. Payments are low. Okay, that's up to 15 euros per teaching hour, but there is always a ceiling, which means that for every working year, any adult educator can work up to 150 hours. They cannot pass that ceiling. Okay? This is the maximum amount of hours they can work within a year. Okay? However, I know very few adult educators who actually manage to work even 150 hours within a year, simply because there are not enough programs. Resources for the teachers are also very low. This means that the adult education structures, they do not provide for the teachers, for example, to make photocopies, to help them, okay, with the infrastructure, etc. These are some numbers for the teaching positions, management positions, etc. Basically in non-vocational adult education in Greece. In the register, there are around 15,000 qualified adult educators. However, only in teaching positions, we can find only 3,840, okay? And these are not the latest data, the latest numbers. These are 2012 numbers. But you can see that we don't need so many. The level of qualification, higher education, any degree, 84%, secondary education, 14%, and of course there is a lower level of education, 2%. Most of them are female, which more or less is the pattern everywhere, 52% to 48%. Again, the age is between 30 and 50, the majority of them. And of course, the large majority, the job is temporary. Very few have a permanent job. This is also important, okay? Because if we're considering professionalization of adult educators in the field, we need to see people developing in the profession. They cannot develop if they have a job now and they get another job 6 months later or a year later. 60 to 100% they're employed part-time, okay? That's 96% of the total. Only 4% are employed full-time. So in terms of career development paths, I have already said that the only action towards this direction is to enter the registry that has been developed by EOPEP. This is the situation that happens right now in my own country. As I said, there is no discussion on issues that you bring here, okay, in this debate, in this conference. I know that it is, for me, being an adult educator in Greece, of course from a different angle, if you like, because I'm a professor, but that does not make things any easier. It's a bit discouraging to see how things develop in my own country. But I take courage because here in this country, at least you seem to steer things up. You have an agenda, okay? You address, if you like, the right issues. And this is important, and this is something, my own knowledge and belief is that does not happen a lot in any other part of Europe, including Greece, of course. I want to thank you a lot for your attention. I also want to, I'll say this in Estonian this time, tänan, yeah, and tänan to Kuliki, who helped me a lot today with the interpretation. She's an excellent interpreter. I'm definitely certain that she's also an excellent English language teacher. Thank you very much indeed.
George, could you stay for a couple of more minutes, and perhaps over the microphone as well? So now I really want you to grab the moment. Nüüd tahaks, et te kasutate seda juhust ära, sest nagu öeldud, iga päev seda kreeklast siin nii-öelda jututada ei saa. Et võtame mõned küsimused saalist. Ja võite küsida eesti keeles, üritan tõlkida. Palun. jah? Kes on esimene? See on nüüd küsimus. Hästi. Võib mina? Ei, siin on palun. Väga hea. Võtan järjekorda.
Hello, my name is Merle Lõhmus. I'm wondering what do you mean by psychopedagogical competencies? We don't know this term very well here in Estonia. Please explain. Thank you.
Yeah, when I refer to psychopedagogy, this is a term that is essentially used in policy documents. Okay, I essentially refer to those competencies that relate to helping the learner learn, basically developing a certain learning behavior, okay, but also in terms of teaching, know how to teach. So there's two things: helping the learner to learn by developing a certain positive, if you like, attitude towards learning, but also know how to teach. Okay? This is what I mean by psychopedagogical competencies.
Saime võib-olla ühe sellise kompetentsi juurde, jah? Et mida teistmoodi ja kuidas on õige termin? Selge.
Yeah, okay. I think I got it. I think Estonia is one of the very few countries now that uses the term andragogy. Okay. Another country that I know for certain, because they have a chair of andragogy, is Serbia, University of Belgrade. Of course, there were other countries that used the term andragogy in the past, but not anymore. Okay. Why not? I don't know. Or perhaps, yes, I do know, because the whole discussion on adult education or andragogy has been dominated by policy making. And policy making stresses more vocational education and training. Okay? And it seems that andragogy, okay, as a principle, as a method, as a discipline, if you like, does not fit that much to vocational education and training in policy makers' minds. Okay? This is why.
Kas on veel küsimusi? I have one question, actually. You were talking about accountability. And as I'm working with governance and civil society, you understand why I'm asking. You know, being responsive towards your target group, towards your partners, is definitely a very, very vital concept.
Absolutely.
But you mentioned it, like the adult educator has to be responsive and accountable for what he or she does. Can you bring some examples practically? How can you be held accountable? How can you be taken as responsive?
Yeah. Listen, I think we need to see how other professions work, operate. Lawyers, for example, or doctors. All around Europe, normally in these professions, doctors are accountable to their own professional, self-regulated professional associations. Okay? We don't have something like this as adult educators. It's the same in some countries for the teaching profession, okay? Especially school teaching, I mean. It's the same for lawyers. Okay? So being accountable means that it's not just being responsible to the person to which I provide the service, but also to a larger community of other professionals. Okay? So this is important, but if we want this, as I said, we also need to create this self-regulated community of professionals in Europe or even nationally. Okay? There is no discussion anywhere right now, anywhere in Europe, on this matter. Okay? Accountability, therefore, is not measuring quality. It is important, but measuring quality does not essentially makes us accountable for what we provide. Okay? Accountability has to do with how other colleagues see our work, how they recognize all these aspects of professionalism to what we do, and of course, in terms of liability, that what we do does not affect in a negative way the people to which we provide our services.
Thank you very much. And one more time applause.
Thank you.